If you've been going around the good old internet looking for the right podcast to fulfill your New York Yankees needs, well, I'll be the first to deliver the good news to you. You have found it. Here on Yapping Yankees with me, your host, Mike Scudero, you and I will be discussing the latest news, takes, and talk throughout the entire Yankee universe. Oh, and there may be some ranting on my behalf. Yeah. Anyway, what do you say we get to it? Let's get to yapping! Well, hello there, my fellow Yankee fans, and welcome to episode 238 of the Yapping Yankees podcast. As always, I am your host, Mike Scudero, your friendly neighborhood Yankee yapper with the best yap in all the land, here on October 6th. 2024 with yet another extra large order of the Yappuccino for you. First postseason edition of 2024. There's the usual round of applause. Thank you. Wow. What a weekend it has been. What a start to the postseason it has been, guys. I'm going to talk about the entire postseason as a whole a bit later on in the show after we hit on our Yankees specifically. Don't worry, I will get to everything else because especially in playoff time, yes, the Yankees are still mostly spoken about on Yapping Yankees, I would hope, but also we do hit on the remainder of the playoffs as well because you never know. It may just, at one point or another, depending on how far our boys go, affect the Yankees. And plus, it's baseball, and we just love baseball in general, so there's that. Otherwise, guys, I gotta be honest, it's late. I don't know how long this episode's gonna be. I mean, we only really have one Yankee game to talk about since we last spoke, like we hit on last week. There was only gonna be one game by the time we talk here today, and that obviously is how it played out. So it is past 8 o'clock already. The reason why I started so late is I honestly just could not pull myself away from Game 2 between the Mets and Phillies at Citizens Bank Park after that wild ending. I couldn't pull myself away from it. I wanted to start recording at like 6 or 6:30, like an hour and a half ago or so. Instead, right now, it's like slightly past 8 o'clock, and I usually don't start this late, but hey, here we are. Playoff baseball, that's what it does to me. It leaves me just glued to my seat in front of the big TV out in the family room. What can I tell you? So, crazy end to that game. But again, we have plenty of time later on to talk about everything else around Major League Baseball. But that's why I started so late here tonight. And I don't know how long this episode is going to be because of it. And I do have work tomorrow. So, you know, the usual. But this is the caveat, I guess, to doing a podcast on Sunday nights. But that is what I signed up for. So here we go nonetheless. And I do hope that even with all the craziness in the baseball postseason so far, that you guys managed to have a good past week as well. And a lot of fun watching baseball like I have had. It continues even now because right next to me on my TV, I have Game 2 of the Padres and the Dodgers on. And Fernando Tatis Jr. literally just hit a solo shot to put the Padres up 1-0. Incredible. Postseason baseball, what can I tell you? My God, but what a start to it for the Yankees just last night. And I don't even mean that completely positively, unfortunately, but don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled they won. The Yankees, of course, would come away with the 6-5 victory in Game 1 at Yankee Stadium against the Royals. That did end up being their opponent after the Royals just won 2 games straight in Baltimore in the wild card round, easily finishing off the dead offense Orioles. They did absolutely nothing. And I actually did predict the Royals to be the team to move on, so I did get that correct, but I did get the amount of games incorrect, because I did have the Orioles putting up a little bit of a fight, especially because the Yankees seemed to wake them up a little bit in the last week in their last series at Yankee Stadium, but that was not the case. The Orioles went right back to playing the exact brand of baseball that they have played for the better part of the last 2 months or so, 2+ months even, one could say. It's just a brand of baseball that's been really boring and just plain unlikable. Their pitching and their hitting just switched from being bad back and forth. They just traded places constantly. One day the pitching would be a disaster. The other day the offense would just be dead. And in this series, the offense being dead was the main story. They've scored 1 freaking run in both games combined. They had absolutely nothing going. They were no match for the Royals. So I had the Orioles putting up a bit more of a fight and pushing the series to at least 3 games, with the Royals still coming out in the third. But, I mean, they were just easy work for the Royals. So the Royals just took care of it in 2 and swept them in the best of 3. So that ended up being the Yankees' opponent. I was a little bit afraid of the Orioles being the Yankees' opponent because, I mean, the Orioles have played pretty well against the Yankees in 2024, to say the least, so I was a little bit afraid to see how that would turn out in a best-of-5 playoff series, but again, like Aaron Boone and many others said, you can't really wish for an opponent because next thing you know, they come back and they'll beat you. I mean, you just never know. It is true when they say the playoffs are pretty much a crapshoot. I don't totally agree with that statement. I have a ceiling to my agreement with that statement. But I also do agree with the fact that you shouldn't really 100% wish for one opponent over the other because you never really know. So I guess I play sort of both sides of that. But it makes sense to play both sides. There's reason to believe both. But nonetheless, the Royals ended up being the Yankees' opponent. They played Game 1 last night. And I'm thrilled that the Yankees managed to take the first game. Do not get me wrong. But at the same time, and it's okay to think this way, they're very fortunate that they did, because this was a pretty sloppy game. A win is a win. So, again, I'm thrilled about that. I'm absolutely thrilled. Please do not misunderstand me. I was more than happy after the final out was recorded. I did my celebrating. I was very happy. Don't get me wrong. But this was very, very sloppy. And I know they always say you'd rather win sloppy than lose pretty. I do agree with that. A win is a win, but it was sloppy. And in the end, ultimately, after the final out was recording, Clay Holmes got the win since the Yankees took the ultimate lead with him having pitched alongside it. And Alex Verdugo was the one to give them said lead when they took that 6-5 lead late.
Holy crap!
Holy crap is right, Frank Barone. Please find me all 0 people who predicted either of those outcomes with Clay Holmes and Alex Verdugo, of all people. Oh my gosh, that's just when baseball is just a hell of a game, man. There's just no predicting it. Nobody drew it up that way. You cannot tell me there was a single human being who drew up either of those outcomes, but either way, sloppy. Plenty of bad moments throughout despite the win. And I gotta say, I resent some comments I have seen on social media regarding actually being able to even say that as a Yankee fan. And this is unfortunately what takes me back to the subject of toxic positivity. This is one of my least favorite things to talk about, because even when you are right, in the eyes of the toxically positive, you are wrong, because you are being anything but 100% positive all the freaking time. There are people all over social media saying, my God, Yankee fans are the worst. They're so ungrateful. They still won the game, and they're still finding things to complain about. They will never be able to appreciate anything good, and they don't deserve anything good. Screw them, this and that. I cannot stand reading tweets like this. Guys, do not listen to any of these shills, and that's what I call them. I am all for being happy when something good happens. I sometimes, by nature, tend to at times be a glass half empty sort of a guy, but I am not 24/7 pessimistic at all. I try my best to stay being a realist, and my realist mentality tells me this, and it's plenty level-headed and fair in my opinion, and I would like to think that a lot of people agree with it. I'm not 100% sure, but in my opinion, you can be more than happy. Like I said at the top of the show, I can be more than happy that the Yankees won last night's game, that a win is a win despite it being sloppy. I just said it before, and I was. But at the same time, if there were a lot of things that happened in last night's game that you saw that you didn't like, you are allowed to talk about them, especially now in a time of the utmost importance like the playoffs, when the most amateur of crap cannot be afforded. And when it does happen, and you still manage to get the victory, you can be happy about said victory, but it's still plenty valid to say that, especially given the circumstances, you are lucky that your team still managed to win the game despite those things happening. You are allowed to say that without nonsensically being painted in a negative light, and only in a negative light by those toxic, positive people. They're very frustrating to deal with because they make you feel like just because the team won, you have no right to say anything or critique anything the Yankees may have done wrong. Let me tell you this, even the Yankees themselves, and the players do this plenty, and I have a great example later on with Alex Verdugo himself, who I have been highly critical of. The players themselves critique themselves and try always to improve. They know the things that they do wrong. Sometimes, depending on the situation, they'll sweep it under the rug a little bit and be a little bit oblivious to it, and that ticks me off sometimes. But I mean, listen, nobody's perfect. It's whatever. I'm not perfect. Far from it. But a lot of the time, these people acknowledge when they've done something wrong and they try to improve upon it. And it's just simply us observing it and talking about it as fans, like we're supposed to do as fans. So just a PSA out there to all people who are fans similarly to me, who will still celebrate a victory, but find nothing wrong with validly pointing out that you saw things you didn't like in a game. You are allowed to mention those things. Do not give in to the toxic positivity crowd who wants to always silence your thoughts because you're not thinking that things are 24/7 fine and dandy in Yankee land. You're allowed to point out faults and point out things that you didn't like in the game. And unfortunately, there were things not to like in this game. Plenty of them, as a matter of fact, from the Yankees' perspective. Both things can be true. Life is not black and white. It is gray. And therefore, you are allowed to still celebrate a victory and also critique what you didn't like. I hate to get all philosophical on you, but some people need to hear that because I'm tired of people getting attacked on social media. Even bigger Yankees names, far bigger than I am on any sort of platform, getting attacked for simply pointing things out. I am sick and tired of seeing it. I've had to go after this toxic positivity crowd plenty of times in my life, and I hate to have to waste time to go after them again here because I saw them out in full force after last night's game. I mean, it's a personal choice to spend any sort of time on them on my content. I mean, I can spend time on them. I can spend time on the Royals fans who were just saying that Major League Baseball has it rigged for the Yankees because of that controversial stolen base call with Jazz Chisholm at second base towards the end of the game before Verdugo's big hit. I can hit on all of these crowds if I want to, but I don't want to spend an eternity on them, but I had to address that because I don't like to see Yankee fans attacking one another for simply being fans. I am all for going after the overly negative fans who routinely take it over the top. Like ones that take it too far with personal attacks or seem like they're actively rooting against the Yankees even though they claim to be a fan. But if you are simply me, just validly pointing out things you didn't like in last night's game and hoping that they don't happen again because you may think that in the near future, the Yankees might not be so lucky to grab a victory with those things happening in a future game, there's nothing wrong with that. At all. So it's okay to point them out. And I'm going to point them out here right now, guys, because there was plenty of bad amidst the good, ultimately, when the Yankees won. Second and third, no one out in the first and not scoring. We've seen that plenty. Volpe's putrid throw to second base that could have cost the team the game easily. And speaking of that play at second base with Jazz's weird stolen base, his weird stolen base where he leaned back towards the bag at the beginning, got a late jump because of that, which costed him some speed initially at the start of the run, slid terribly into second base, and let's be honest, I will agree with the Royals fans with one thing, not completely, because it could go either way on replay, in my opinion, because of the closeness of his foot to the bag by the time the tag was applied, but, I don't know, I think he might have gotten away with being thrown out by being called safe on that play. I'm inclined to lean a little bit more towards the fact that he might have been out. Despite it having been a brutal throw by Perez, I mean, I still think he might have been thrown out, and that was a crucial call because, of course, Jazz would end up coming home on what was the go-ahead RBI single by Verdugo. But throughout the rest of the game, too, ugly at-bats all throughout right up until the very end. Garrett Cole was very bad. I can't even mince words with that one. He just was not big game ace Garrett Cole last night. It's just as simple as that. Without having the numbers on hand for precise statistics and specific references, I'd say there was probably about a dozen balls absolutely scorched off the bat from the very beginning of his outing. Even in the first inning, the one positive about this was that it was just a 6-pitch inning, very economical because of this. But even in that first inning, every single hit that ended up being an out, fortunately right at people, nice running play by Judge and whatnot, everything like that, but every single ball was scorched off the bat. He was just getting hit hard all night. It was just quite a bit of bad to go around, honestly. It made it a very sloppy victory. But again, At the end of the day, for you toxic positives out there, gotta reiterate, at the end of the day, a win is a win. I'm not even just saying that to appease those people. It is my honest opinion. I can look at both sides, which is a concept that I think people in general really need to become more familiar with, because I think it would lead to a lot more civil and level-headed discourse, not even just in the sports world. But I can look at both sides, acknowledge one, but still feel a way about the other. Ugly game, but a win is a win. That's what we always say, right? So, hence the overall mentality of today's episode, as you can see in the episode title, sloppy, but fortunate for today, as of last night's game. But again, like I said before, it's okay to mention these things because you make that many mistakes again, I'm not so sure they get away with winning another game like that. The Royals aren't the best team, although they got some solid pitching, but they're also not the worst team by a long shot. And if you play every game like this, you'll be lucky to win another, honestly. This is the playoffs. You can't afford to give teams that many chances to capitalize on some really ugly things, especially that Volpe play. Inexcusable. I will give the Yankees plenty of credit for one aspect, though. They absolutely would not give up. The lead changed 5 times in this freaking game. You seldom see that in any playoff game. Kept getting knocked down, even if at times it was by their own hand, but kept on getting back up. And actually, another thing, I'll even give them a second thing. Possibly the most important thing. Did anybody realize, and I know some people did, but did anybody really sit down and realize that for once, especially in a big game like this, making it even bigger, this is something that seldom happened this year, the Yankees actually won a game without Judge and Cole being effective, or even Giancarlo Stanton, who we all know to usually turn it on in a big way in October, who actually, because of his non-existent speed, one may argue he even costed the Yankees a run or two last night. So did you actually happen to take note of that the Yankees actually managed to win a game where they were also pretty inefficient and sloppy in at times without the help of any of those three for the most part? It's pretty incredible. That's not something the Yankees pull off on a regular basis. So I will not make a small deal of this. A massive overarching theme of the 2024 Yankees has always been if Soto and Judge, or if Cole's not out there, if certain things don't go right, this team gets killed. Well, Soto had himself a hell of a night last night. I will say that much. Should have maybe even had even better because there was a diving play in the right field hole made against him that took away even another hit and making him have a 4-hit evening. But outside of that, the main core guys, nobody else really showed themselves. Cole, Judge, Giancarlo. Those big three. Nothing. But the Yankees still won, and in really spirited fashion, not giving up. That was very encouraging to see, and to me, that's a big deal. Might be a little bit of a detail that flies over the heads of some, but not this guy right over here. I thought that was a very important takeaway from last night's game. I mean, speaking of player performances, why don't we hit on everyone's performances individually from last night's game, and thereby, simultaneously, of course, go through some of the details of last night's game. We can really pick apart yesterday's game if we want. Since it's the only one we have to talk about from this past week, there was no other action for the Yankees. It was mainly just wild card action, and then you had last night's game 1. So, why don't we actually discuss last night's game? No need for the Yapping Yankees time machine anymore, really, unless it's just multiple bunch of games in 1 week because there's just one game and it was only last night. So we could skip that sound effect for tonight, folks. It's all good. But let's pick apart last night's game. Go even further in detail. I guess this is this week's version of weekly recap, sort of. But go even more in-depth over some of the general points I already hit on in the open. Because this was a crazy game. It really was. I would say definitely more stressful for the Yankees and their fans because a lot of the times, like I said before, sometimes they were knocked down and knocked on their ass. It was by their own hand, which made it even more frustrating or stressful at times, but they also wouldn't give up. So they kept on giving you hope, and then the Royals would take the lead back, and the Yankees gave you more hope. The Royals take the lead back, the Yankees gave you more hope, and then ultimately came back out on top. So just a lot happened in the game. Like I said, top of the first right away, Garrett Cole gets hit, and he gets hit hard, but fortunately, they were all right two people. Juan Soto makes a play right in front of the wall to start the game. Bobby Witt Jr. hits a piss missile out to deep left center field towards the deepest part of the park, and Judge runs it down nicely, and then a screaming line drive to Judge to end the inning by Pasquantino. Then the bottom of the first comes around. Well, you got Gleyber Torres leading it off with a walk. Leadoff Gleyber still doing his damn thing, even into the postseason. So just making those of us who wanted him off the team a bunch of months ago, and it was the vast majority of us, I don't want to even hear it. We all know that. Those people not owning up to their opinions, come on out of the woodwork. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. All of us have been wrong before. Soto gets a double, ropes one right after that to start off what was a great night for him. And then after that, the Yankees blew that, like I said before, first real negative of the game. Second and third, nobody out. Chance to capitalize on Waka, someone who they had really struggled against this year, and they do not get the job done. Unfortunately, in the top of the second, that's when damage would actually be done against Cole, and the Yankees are honestly lucky that it wasn't worse, because the inning started off with a hard single by Perez, a walk by Yuli Gurriel, who just owned his old teammate Garrett Cole last night. I mean, Cole could not figure out a way to get him out between walking him and giving up hits. It was crazy. So it was first and second. Then Melendez lines a base hit to right field. Fortunately, Perez was the one rounding third and coming home because he is super slow, as we know. And Juan Soto managed to get the ball and gun him down at the plate. Someone who is often criticized in the field. Like I said, he was not as brutal this year in the field as Yankee fans will paint him out to be. Of course, he had his couple of bad moments. That happens, though. It does happen. And considering how rough of a time Soto has had in the field prior, I would say this year is still an improvement. And this capitalized on that. Similarly, ironically enough, to the very first game of the year when he threw out that huge run at home in Houston that would have tied the game, but otherwise it was the second out of that inning, and of course the Yankees would go on to win that game. They would go on to win this one. Granted, this was much earlier in this game, but first game of the season had a huge throw-out play at home, and now in the first game of the postseason, he throws another huge throw to home plate and gets what would have been the first run of this game. So Soto, again, preventing what could have been worse damage, especially considering the fact that after that, the Royals did actually still go on to score their first run anyway on what was a Tommy Pham sac fly after that. So it could have been at least 2 runs for all we know. Who knows? Or maybe even worse. You don't know how the inning would go if that was not the first out, if they still had nobody out. Who knows? So they did get out of that inning still with it 1-0, but prevented worse damage, so that's good. Nothing happened in the bottom of the second, and then top of the third, Cole got into slight trouble again because he gave up a hit to Massey, but unfortunately, still giving up hard hits here and there, but he managed to finish the third scoreless. Then, fortunately, in the bottom of the third, after Verdugo in his first at-bat led off the bottom of the third with a nice single into left field, after walking in his first at-bat setting up a Soto double, leadoff Gleyber would do this.
Fly ball right field. Back goes Pham. In front of the wall. It is out of here.
This is where the fun begins.
Yeah, you're right, Anakin. This really was where the fun began. I mean, you could hear how loud the stadium was, but there was one other thing I wanted to talk about here today, because this is a major talking point, audio and courtesy of TBS, by the way, but on that note, big talking point throughout the Yankee community today, because there was someone who actually said that despite how loud the stadium sounded there, apparently it was even louder. I heard from a lot of people on social media, and also a couple of people who went to the games themselves who I happen to know and talk to on at least a somewhat regular basis. And they said that after watching the highlights at home when they got home from the game, they said that the stadium itself in person was a hell of a lot louder than what they heard on the replays and what we heard live in real time on television. And people are saying that TBS actually turned down the crowd noise. And Bob Costas, as you heard on that replay, was obviously very loud and well heard, along with Ron Darling, who was his color guy. But, yeah, TBS, if that really is true that they screwed with the crowd noise, that's really stupid. I mean, especially when it comes to the Yankees. Because they always have that famous expression out there, and it is true. I've been to Yankees playoff games, so I can vouch for this personally. there really is nothing like the postseason in the Bronx. And what do you do with that if you're TBS? You turn down the crowd noise?
Screw you.
Yeah, honestly, facts, Johnny Lawrence. Screw you, TBS. Gotta be honest, that's really crappy. You're gonna strip the viewers of the experience of listening to what Yankee Stadium truly sounds like in the playoffs when that famous mantra out there exists, there's nothing like the playoffs in the Bronx. Like, are you kidding me? So if that is at least even slightly the truth, screw TBS. They gotta be better than that. You can't be screwing with the crowd noise, especially with something like that. That's a huge moment. Yankees jumped out in front, 2-1. Gleyber Torres, huge home run. Like, hello? What are we doing? So I didn't understand that personally. I really didn't. And this trend would apparently continue throughout the game. Everyone who was at the game that I've spoken to, and a lot of people between social media and personal acquaintances or friends, everyone has said that it just didn't sound anything like Yankee Stadium. Yankee Stadium in person was a lot louder. So it's just... 1-2 people say it, maybe they might be over-exaggerating a little bit, maybe it was a little bit in their head, but, you know, a dozen plus people say it, and then you start to listen a little bit. And it's been a lot more in total than just like a dozen. So, very odd there. Unfortunately for the Yankees, Garrett Cole would go back out there in the top of the fourth and do exactly what an ace shouldn't do. Salvador Perez lined out again right to Verdugo, so a hard hit. Yuli Gurriel gets on base again via a walk. And after getting a single that should have driven in the first run of the game earlier, if not for Juan Soto, Melendez steps back up to the plate, and this time to right center field hits a go-ahead 2-run shot, so they get those 2 runs right back, did the Royals, to retake the lead 3-2. Just not what you do there. And then right after that, Tommy Pham got a hit as well. And then Michael Garcia, after an Isbel strikeout, got a hit too. So again, Garrett Cole just getting smacked all around. Then fortunately after that, Verdugo actually made a very nice play in left field on a Michael Massey shallow fly ball. So credit to Verdugo there. And we'll get to him later on. I got a lot to say after this game is over when it comes to Verdugo. Bottom of the fourth, though, the Yankees would try to come back once again. Stanton led off the inning with a walk. Jazz popped out, though. Volpe lined out to right field. Oswaldo got a double into right center field, but this was the first instance of Giancarlo Stanton potentially costing the Yankees a run that I was talking about before. Just about anybody else who's running on the bases, maybe except if it was like DJ or Rizzo or something, just about anybody else, I think, would have scored and tied the game on this double to right center, especially because the ball was bobbled a bit in right center, but Stanton still couldn't come around to score because the man can't run. So after that, Verdugo would pop out, and the Yankees wouldn't score. They'd still be down. Cole, fortunately, in the top of the fifth, managed to work a 1-2-3. Bottom of the fifth, the Yankees would end up taking the lead back, and this inning was like pulling teeth because they didn't even do it via any hits or anything, really. Gleyber started off this inning with a walk, just like he did to start the game offensively for the Yankees, so did that once again. Soto got another hit after that, so Soto and Gleyber really a nice job setting the table up there and doing some damage. Then Judge walked. Some things to say on Judge later on as well. So the bases were loaded at this point, and Austin Wells, obviously, who has been struggling for weeks and weeks and weeks, had a very difficult most of September. We well established that last week and even the week or two prior to that. Very good at-bat for Wellesley. Great at-bat. And he would end up walking in that tying run, being Gleyber, to tie the game at 3. They make a pitching change after this. Giancarlo would pop out with the bases loaded and nobody out, so that's just terrible. And to top it off, it was only a 3-pitch at-bat, so it wasn't even really like a crazy effort or anything on his behalf. Jazz would ground into a force out. They would get the force at home, being Juan Soto with the bases still loaded. So now it's 2 outs, and the Yankees might have only scored that 1 run on that bases-loaded walk. Fortunately, Anthony Volpe, with just about the only good thing he did all night, would walk after that to drive in the 4th run to make it 4-3. Oswaldo would get called out on strikes after that, but the Yankees retake the 4-3 lead, like I said before, just back and forth and back and forth. Although that inning, again, very long, very stressful. Then, in the top of the 6th, starting off the inning but not being able to nearly finish it off because Yuli Gurriel would lead off the inning with a hit, the Yankees were just done with Garrett. I'm honestly surprised he even started this inning. Just a bad night for him. So his final line, he went 5+, 7 hits with 4 runs allowed, 3 of them earned. Reason why one of those was unearned was because of something that would happen later on in that top of the 6th, leading to Yuli Gurriel scoring since that was his responsibility. 2 walks, only 4 strikeouts, giving up that home run as well to Melendez, who just hit him really hard all night, honestly. And even a lot of the outs he got, just really squared up hits that were fortunately right at people. He just didn't have his best stuff. He did have flashes where he was Cole. Some of the pitches were well executed, especially the knuckle curve, but I don't know, the velo was down at times. The location just wasn't there. He was missing his spots often. He really just wasn't the usual efficient big game Cole. I love Garrett, of course, so I hope that, especially if the Yankees do win the games necessary, the amount of games necessary for him to pitch again, I hope he has a strong comeback next time, and I actually do believe that he will. I very much believe in Cole. But this game, again, it's okay to be realistic about it and be upfront about it. It just wasn't it. It was not it for Cole. He did a bad job. Sorry. For those shills out there who don't like that, he wasn't good. Sorry to hurt your little feelings. But he came out of the game. Tim Hill came in, got Melendez to line out to Verdugo. After this was the really brutal play that would really come back to bite the Yankees. Pham grounded it to short. Volpe made the tougher part of the play by sliding to get to it. Had to just throw it to second to Glaber for the force, and then at least try at an inning-ending double play, but he throws the ball completely away, goes down the right field line. That advanced Gurriel all the way to third with Tommy Pham making it to second. So now it's second and third, 1 out when it could have been a potential inning-ending double play. These things hurt when it comes to happening in the playoffs and giving a good opponent more chances and extra outs to work with. Volpe, we've talked about him just screwing up routine plays and routine throws and bobbling routine ground balls at times when it comes to big moments. We saw it with him heading into the All-Star break in Baltimore and on a few other occasions in big moments. Listen, with how the guy has hit, or I guess I should say not hit, we need at least the continued elite defense, especially in big potential inning-ending moments. If you're not going to at least even give us that, your worth is just going to continue to just plummet. Because if we're not going to get that Gold Glove defense almost all the time, and I do understand he's a human being, he makes mistakes like all of us do, but in big moments like that, it just simply cannot happen. It can't happen. You got to lock the hell in. You did the harder part of the play by sliding to get to the ball. You just had to throw to Glaber. It just can't happen. You cannot be giving the opposition, especially in the playoffs, that much room to work with. Give them that many more extra outs to work with. It can't happen. It was just brutal. And of course, naturally, both of those runs would come home to score, but because of that error, Yuli Gurriel, despite being Cole's responsibility, would be an unearned run thanks to Volpe, so that's what that meant on Cole's line before. Tommy Pham would come home behind him. Royals would retake the lead. So another lead change, the 4th of the night at that point. Then Clay Holmes comes in, and it's time for me to just start getting a stress stomach ache and potentially send me to the bathroom. Fortunately, despite me thinking that the Yankees must have had some sort of head trauma heading into the playoffs after saying that Holmes would be seeing high leverage situations, this being the first, of course, right out of the gate to start the playoffs, he actually managed to get the job done. He did give up a weak infield single to Massey after he got Garcia to line out to Judge, but he actually managed to keep the Royals quiet off the scoreboard as of that. And that was shocking to me. Even got Bobby Witt to ground out. You know what? Shut me the hell up. Fine. I always say how the playoffs can really just be a clean slate for a lot of guys who were on a lot of people's you-know-what lists throughout the vast majority of the year. Good start for Clay in that regard, I guess. So he got out of that, but obviously the Yankees were still down 5-4. The bottom of the 6th. This is when things would get even more interesting. Verdugo would start off with a walk, and then after a Glaber strikeout, Juan Soto would single, Judge would strike out, and then After his moment also earlier on in the game, walking with the bases loaded to drive in the tying run, my boy Austin Wells, who I predicted on social media and on here to have a bounce-back performance, multiple of them, in the postseason after the 5 days of rest, after a lot of people were suspecting he might be tired, after catching more games than he was ever used to. After 5 games of rest, I predicted this guy would bounce back in the playoffs. After already having done so with the bases-loaded walk earlier, the man does this.
Wells lines one to right, and Pham will not have a play. Tying run heads for the plate. The Yankees have evened it up.
That's my catcher, baby.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah, Stone Cold. So Austin Wells tying the game at 5. Giancarlo would ground out after that, unfortunately, to end the inning, but now we're going into the 7th with a tie game. Clay Holmes would pitch the 7th as well. The Royals would go down 1-2-3. So Clay Holmes finishing an inning and 2/3 scoreless, much to the shock of myself. Only just giving up that one hit, the infield hit to Massey. That is it. So unbelievable there. Could not believe it. Still tied going into the home half of the 7th inning. And this is when the dagger would happen. Jazz starts off the inning with a single. This right here was the play that has everybody talking. Jazz, very weirdly, people were suspecting whether or not he was going to go. Anthony Volpe was at the plate. He strikes out. Not a surprise at all there, unfortunately. And it seemed like on the pitch, Jazz sort of leaned back towards first and then ran towards second base, but that lean towards first really slowed him down, really screwed up his jump, as I said before. Didn't really have the best of speed going down to second base. I mean, it's a good thing it wasn't a good throw by Perez. Otherwise, he would have been out by, I don't know, 20 feet. It would have been embarrassing. But even with the brutal throws still close, that's how awful of a jump Jazz got. I don't know what he was doing. I really don't. And then to finish it off, like I said before, was a brutal slide, not even head first. And it was a really close play, initially called safe. They were replaying it for a while. I thought on the replay that Jazz was out. On the replay, his foot is dangerously close to second base once the tag is applied. But it seems like there might have been like a hair dividing his foot with the base, implying that maybe he didn't fully touch the base as of yet, or maybe not at all by the time the tag was applied. I can't fully tell, and they're not going to overturn something unless it's conclusive evidence, as they always love to say, even though they do not stick by that sometimes. The replay system is weird sometimes, so I will give the Royals fans and all of us fans who have been victims of this replay system at times that much, because the replay system has been very hypocritical sometimes and very inconsistent with their preconceived notions of what's clear and conclusive and what's not. It's weird sometimes. They have a very weird line for that. I thought he was out, but I didn't 100% blame them for calling him safe, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't see enough to really see that his foot was off the base because it was very close. I think, personally, he was out. I'm just saying. I think he was out. But after that, like I always say, you can be mad at a potential bad call being made, whether it be by an umpire on the field or with the replay system with the people in New York at MLB headquarters. You could be mad at it regardless. But I always hold the Yankees accountable for this, and the Royals fans should hold the Royals accountable for this as well. Nobody says that after that run has to come home to score. You can be mad at it all you want and say that you're pissed off and that it was an obvious call in your eyes and how dare Major League Baseball, what the hell are they looking at? Are they watching a different game than we're watching? You're more than entitled to say that. But you also have to acknowledge, like I often do with my own team in the interest of fairness, nobody said the Royals had to allow that run after that. And nobody forced them to allow that run after that. Did it hurt their chances of having a cleaner inning because otherwise it would have been a strike him out, throw him out double play? Yeah, I'm not arguing that. But it was what it was, and it's time for you to still finish the inning after that. They didn't do that. I understand the anger over the call if you thought he was out. I thought he was out. Wasn't the most definitive play I've ever seen, but I still thought he was out. So I'm being honest with that. That's how you know that I'm level-headed and objective here. I think he's out, or he was out, rather. But again, no one forced that run to score. Oswaldo would strike out after that, so now it's 2 outs after the Volpe and Cabrera strikeouts. And then, after having already had a hit and a walk earlier in the game, it was Verdugo's turn again. With Jazz on second and 2 outs, game on the line. Alex Verdugo, highly criticized, and fairly so, for his gameplay throughout the vast majority of the season from mid-June to the end, if I'm being honest. Comes up in this crucial situation after being put in the starting lineup controversially, to the misunderstanding of many, including myself to a degree. The man comes up and does this.
Base hit to left. Chisholm can fly. He rounds third and heads for the plate. He would have beaten the throw anyway. It squirts away from Perez, and the Yankees jump back in front, 6-5.
Let me tell you something. Even with TBS's apparent sound manipulation with the crowd noise, you could tell that that place was going bonkers. It was insanity. I could even tell that even with the lower noise. But Verdugo, what can I say? All the credit to him. He came through in the end. He really did. And it was no crap hit either. Line drive in the left. Jazz came home, scored. Yanks have the lead. That was the 5th and final lead change of the night. Because then after that, Tommy Kahnle would come in the 8th, have the first 2 hitters ground out, walk Hampson, and it was time for Luke Weaver to get a 4-out save, and that he did. Because Luke has been, as I said the last couple of weeks, as the new Yankees closer, an absolute warrior. Yankees win game 1, 6-5. Hell yeah, round of applause. That's the way you want to start the series. So the Yankees are up 1-0 going into game 2, which is taking place tomorrow night at 7:38 Eastern, Monday the 7th at Yankee Stadium. It'll be Carlos Rodon against Cole Ragans, and Ragans and Lugo, a couple of stud arms in that Royals rotation. Like I said, they have good pitching. It's going to be a tough matchup. Ragans did well earlier in the year against them, and the Yankees generally had a tough time against lefties throughout the year. So this ought to be a very interesting matchup here. I'm a little nervous about it, but if the Yankees are able to go up 2-0, that would be humongous. Going on the road, having beaten Ragans and Waka, a couple of really tough arms, especially on the Yankees, that would be really big for the Yanks, man. That would be real big. So you just hope that the home field advantage is doing them good. The Bronx Zoo is motivating the boys, and they get the job done tomorrow. But that's the matchup for tomorrow. Then obviously Tuesday is going to be a travel day because they'll be heading to KC regardless of tomorrow night's result. Wednesday will be at 7:08 p.m. Eastern, just so people know. All these games for this ALDS, by the way, for the Yankees at least, are on TBS, so that'll still remain the same for programming purposes, just so you all know. Wednesday the 9th, obviously no pitchers are definitively announced yet for either side, but 7:08 Eastern at Kansas City. Then Game 4, if necessary, will be a Thursday the 10th at 8:08 p.m. Eastern. That game will be if necessary. Then, obviously, Game 5, if that is to be necessary, that'll be on Saturday the 12th, back at Yankee Stadium at 8:08 p.m. Eastern, before the ALCS would obviously begin next Monday the 14th. But by the time we talk next Sunday, guys, and this is a bit nerve-wracking to realize to a certain degree, but by the time we talk next Sunday, the ALDS, for the Yankees at least, and for everybody else too, will be decided. And we're going to know whether or not our boys are moving on to the CS for the 4th time since 2017 and could finally, potentially, please God Almighty, end this pennant drought that they are on of 15 years. They have seldom ever done this throughout the history of the entire franchise since the 1920s. Gone 15 plus years without winning a pennant. Enough of that already. So as far as player performances, spoke about Cole already. The bullpen was honestly, other than Tim Hill giving up that hit after the Volpe era, but I can't even really blame him because that was really Volpe's fault primarily. The bullpen was nails. Tim Hill got his ground ball and honestly was fine. Clay Holmes was great. Tommy Kahnle was fine. Luke Weaver is a warrior. So the bullpen, great job to them, as they have done for weeks now, with that real solid core at the back end there that we've been talking about for weeks that the Yankees have discovered. Or should I say rediscovered in some cases, because at the beginning of the season, Clay Holmes had a 0 ERA for the better part of the first, month and a half plus. And you had guys like Kahnle out there who was still doing terrific as well, but then later on in the game, you found other gems like Tim Hill and Jake Cousins. Luke Weaver's been in the fold as well throughout the entire time, more or less. Had a little bit of a hiccup for those few games towards the later part of the season there, but for the most part, Luke Weaver was nails for the vast majority of the season and is now an absolute warrior as the new Yankees closer, as we know. So certain guys have been there in the fold since the beginning, may have fallen off at one point or another throughout the season, especially Clay Holmes having been an absolute disaster for the vast majority of it, blowing all of those games, over a dozen to be exact, 13. But if he's going to join that fold, like I said a couple of weeks ago, Clay Holmes, if he wants to, could really join that nice fold back there in the back end of that bullpen if he would like. That would only bolster things even further. And you saw that potentially taking place last night. Would be huge if that could stick around for the remainder of the postseason. It would be bigger than I can put into words, honestly. So, pitching in the bullpen, great. No problem with it. Cole, as we established, just not good. Too many scorched hits, even the outs, and just didn't pitch like an ace in a big game. Well established that. In the lineup, like we were talking about, Gleyber Torres continuing to do leadoff Gleyber things. You had Juan Soto was 3 for 5. Great night for him. You had Austin Wells with his big bases loaded walk and then the huge game tying hit. You had Jazz starting off that inning where Alex Verdugo would drive in the go-ahead and 6th run of the game. He would start that with that hit, so that was a big moment. Had some fine defensive moments down at third as well. I even particularly liked the part when after Volpe made that huge error, there was a ground ball. It really should have been a shortstop's play, but Jazz kind of like cut in front of him to end the inning, just made the play. I was like, nah, give me that. The inexperienced third baseman having a cut in front of the Gold Glove shortstop. It was just pretty funny, to be honest. Then you had Oswaldo. Himself a decent night. Definitely a lot of great defensive plays at first base. I mean, while Rizzo is out, that is my damn first baseman, man. We were talking about that last week, but my God. I mean, he even gave a really funny analogy at the end of the game when Rizzo was really giving them pointers on fielding, him and Ben Rice. And he was saying, we're just kind of the students, and Rizzo is kind of our Mr. Miyagi. I thought that was absolutely adorable to hear. It's just funny that he used that comparison. But he was 1 for 4. He did have 3 strikeouts, so his goodness didn't really particularly come from the offense, although he did have that one hit. It was mainly defensively. And he had a lot of crucial moments. That's why I said he did okay. Because in the field, you can't take value away from some great defense. Defense is especially vital in the playoffs, which is why I was as hard on Volpe as I was before, because that crap just cannot happen. So good on Oswaldo for at least being a good defender, but you know he's going to have those good hitting moments as well here and there. So as long as he can have those, especially in the playoffs, he had that huge home run in Cleveland a couple of years ago as well. If he can mix in some of those moments and just be himself with the defense as well, he could be a good weapon. He really can be. As far as the guys who didn't have themselves a great game, well, Aaron Judge, and this is unfortunately becoming a bit of a stigma for him, how he is in the playoffs, and people talking about, well, if he does this crappy in the playoffs all the time after having those great regular seasons, well, then that renders the regular seasons meaningless. Well, I do agree with that overall mentality, especially if you're a Yankee looking to make the playoffs every year and always in contention, and being the captain, no less, of the fact that if you're always going to perform absolutely crappy in the playoffs, and that really does put a bit of a dent in the importance of your regular seasons, it doesn't devalue them much because, I mean, they're still incredible, and they're still for the record books of all time, especially what Aaron Judge has accomplished. But it'll have some people maybe lose a degree of respect for it, whether or not you care that that'll happen, because this is the big stage. This is what you play for. You play to win a championship, especially if you're the New York Yankees, once again. And he's the captain. So I understand why people are harping in on this, and I do agree that Aaron Judge has had his share of uglier moments in the playoffs at the plate where you wish he really could have come through and made a bit more of a presence for himself and really joined the goodness of some particular game, perhaps, and really was more impactful on offense. But there is one thing that we have to keep in perspective as well. Judge has had some decent moments in the playoffs. Some of them have been in wild card games, but I mean, those still count. The wild card games are playoff games, whether it be the one-game death match that existed before the third wild card came into existence, or now. It still counts all the same. He had that huge home run against the Twins in 2017 in that wild card game. Against Cleveland in the DS, after that, he really didn't do much. He only had 1 hit and 20 at-bats. But then in the CS against the Astros, you may remember that he actually did a pretty nice job. He went 6 for 24. He drove in 7 runs in that series, hit 3 home runs. He had a .357 on base percentage, .708 slugging, amounting to a 1,065 OPS. So, despite the Yankees, of course, having come up short in that series for whatever reason you want to mention, especially regarding that specific year in 2017, regarding the Astros, and he may not have had some moments that he came through with, but still had himself a decent series. So, just talking about stats in general, that's a fact. I mean, he only hit .250, but could have been much worse. I mean, the other stats were just fine. He contributed, no doubt about that. Then in the wild card game in 2018 against the Astros, you might remember, he also had that huge home run in that game at Yankee Stadium that almost made the stadium just fall apart completely. And he also had 2 hits in that one. Then, of course, they'd go on to the DS against the Red Sox, and that would be very embarrassing if you recall how that overall series would turn out. But he was 6 for 16 throughout that series. He had 2 homers in that one as well, batted .375, .444 on base, .750 slugging, 1194 OPS, amounting from all of that, the on-base and slugging. So that series overall, he wasn't bad. Again, maybe some moments you could recall that you wish he came through that he didn't in some big spots, but we're just talking general stats here. And in certain big moments, he definitely did come through. But not horrible stats for that one. Then in 2019, in the DS against the Twins, in that series he batted .333, .538 on base percentage, .333 slugging, .872 OPS. So that wasn't bad. Then unfortunately in 2019 in the ALCS, he did have that humongous home run off of Verlander at the start of the series, so that was definitely big. But then after that, not too much else to speak of, so that was kind of probably when it started to go downhill a little bit. The rest of that series wasn't too pretty for him. .321 on base, .360 slugging, .681 OPS, .240 average. So not too hot there, so I kind of understand that. 2020, I really don't like calling back to that season much at all because it was just a weird year. It really was. Wasn't a pretty postseason for him that year in the wild card game against Cleveland or in the DS against Tampa. 2021, obviously, it was only that one-game wild card death match in Boston. He had a hit in that game, but that was really all for that. So I'd say really except for the Verlander home run at the start of the series, and maybe the CS in 19, it wasn't so hot for him in the playoffs from then on for the most part. Because then, with that 2021 wild card game, he only had that 1 hit. And then it was just 2022, really the only other evidence to call back to, because in 23, the Yankees obviously didn't make the playoffs. But in the DS against Cleveland, he had those couple of big home runs in Cleveland as well. But other than that, he only batted .200 because those 2 home runs were 2 of what was only 4 total hits and 20 at-bats and 21 plate appearances in that series against Cleveland. So, not the greatest series in that one either, but because of those 2 home runs, 500 slugging and 738 OPS, so not brutal, but the quantity of hits was not there, obviously, so that did that in. And in the 2022 ALCS, which is obviously another pinnacle of embarrassment by the Yankees at the hands of the Astros, and they got disgracefully swept in that round in 22, he was dreadful in that series. He had 1 hit and 16 at-bats, 17 plate appearances, didn't drive in any runs or hit any homers, struck out 4 times, .063 average, 118 on base, 180 OPS. You get the picture. So that left a really bad taste in people's mouths. Didn't go to the playoffs last year, obviously, and now this year, it's only a game, but he had a bit of a rough start yesterday, struck out 3 times. So my point in going through all those numbers is that Judge, while especially in the last couple of postseason appearances has not been great and recency has not been kind to him, statistically and in just about any other way in the playoffs. He wasn't always this way in the postseason. He has gotten his big hits here and there, and the stats haven't always been brutal in every single series. So I just want to ground that a little bit here with the Yankee fan base really getting on him. I do understand that, especially as of late, I do think Judge really has to kick things higher into gear in the postseason of late. He's simply too important to not do it, which is also why it was very important to me to see the Yankees get the win despite him being quiet last night. That was very important. Everyone's saying, oh, if not for Judge and Soto, nothing would happen for this team. That was not really what we saw yesterday with the exception of Juan Soto, who at the end of the day, yes, he did get 3 hits and had a phenomenal night, but he didn't even drive in any runs himself. That was the rest of the team, particularly Wells with 2, Glaber with his home run driving in 2, and then the bottom of the lineup, Volpe driving that run on the walk, and Verdugo driving in that huge run at the end with that single. So that was why that was another very important quality. Even without that being done, even without Judge, that's huge to me. But yes, I do think that going forward, and I'm going to trust in him, Judge has got to be a bit better in the playoffs, especially as of late. He's got to be better. Got to shake that stigma a little bit, especially if you want to be remembered for something truly iconic. Not that he hasn't achieved anything iconic of yet, because he definitely has, but you really become truly immortal in October. Becoming a champion, which is not an individual accomplishment, it is a team accomplishment. That's why I also find it a bit unfair to hold that against certain players sometimes throughout history. But becoming a champion, being right in the middle of great production on the way there and even all the way to the end, that's when you become truly, truly immortal, especially in Yankee history. And I am one of the bigger Judge fans out there. I believe he can do it. I know he can do it. And I'm going to continue believing in him going forward. And shame on everyone else who is not. You can continue calling back to all of his bad recent stats in the playoffs and what it has amounted to in total, because of the recent ones in the last 2 or 3 playoff years, it has not been pretty for him, and it's really driven down his stats to a degree. 206 average, 307 on base, 451 slugging, 758 OPS overall. Not brutal, but definitely even under average, I would say. I know he can do it, and I hope he does. And he can finally get rid of that stigma, because it has been a big discussion amidst the Yankee fan base for that. So that's just what I wanted to say on that. But he had an ugly night last night. Stanton, like I said, could have very well have costed the team at least a couple of runs with his non-existent base running. So that was not good. So I definitely hope that changes for Giancarlo in future games, because we all know what to expect of him in October. This is a guy who really just ridiculously turns it on in October. But did not start off that way for him. Definitely did not. Volpe, like I said before, this is really the last one I'll talk about as of the lineup for yesterday. But again, except for that bases loaded walk, which was clutch. I'm not going to take that away from him. But otherwise, the quality of at-bats is still just not where I'd like it to be outside of that walk. And obviously made that big error last night. He's just got to lock in. He's got to lock in. Because the overall concept of clean slate in the playoffs, making up for just about anything you did in the regular season, if you make yourself into that much of a hero in October, that is a real thing. We've seen it happen many times with many players. And Volpe has that potential, because he did have a disappointing year, if we're really being honest with ourselves. Disappointing. Regressed in many ways. Not every single way, but in some ways to even his rookie year. He regressed in some ways. And if he's even going to be making those defensive mistakes in big moments like he did yesterday, it's going to just continue to get harder and harder to make excuses for him and defend him, which he doesn't deserve. I mean, he's going to be headed into his 3rd season next year already, if you could believe it. Time flies. It's time to start to think about leaving the baby crap behind and locking in and getting it done when it matters most. So yesterday I was really ticked with him, not going to lie, getting really fed up with the crap with him, especially in these big moments. It just can't happen again. I'll continue to remain patient, though. I mean, because not only what choice do I have, but the Yankees believe in this kid. I'll believe in him until I just have had absolutely enough. And I don't think I'm going to hit that point at least until, I would say, late 2025 into 2026. Because I like to give guys a lot of time once they come up. I like to do that. I think it's fair. Adjustment to the major leagues, it does take time for a lot of people before they achieve greatness. And it does. That's an actual thing. So I'm willing to do that with Volpe, and I'll continue to do it. I probably just shot myself in the foot because I'm saying, I won't run out of patience for a while, but then he'll probably do a dozen more stupid things in this postseason because of the importance and value of it. Will probably just have me give up on him right now. But anyway, no, I'm just kidding. But it's got to get better with him. He's got to be better. That's all I can say. Verdugo. This will be the last one I discuss. I've been hard on the guy for a long time. He was obviously phenomenal through the first 2.5 months of the season, I would say, with the whole mentality of we're dogs out here and everything and doing the barking the whole 9 yards. And then something happened when the Yankees went to Boston in mid-June. Something happened to the entire Yankee team as a whole as of that weekend for the better part of the following month to a month and a half, even past the All-Star break. We all know that. Verdugo was right in the center of that, though. He did start off that series in Boston with that home run, but then after that, something happened to the guy, and it just, even he put it in this press conference I'm about to play for you, just spiraled out of control. And it lasted literally up until the end. He had a couple of weeks there in later August or so, into the start of September, give or take, where, it was all singles for the most part. Really nothing of significance. Still slugging and OPS and on base even, just really not much to speak of, but he had a couple of weeks there where he was getting some more hits and his bat was coming back a little bit, but otherwise, outside of that, really from the better part of mid-June all the way through to the end, nobody understood why this guy was still being played, especially when it came to September 1st arriving and rosters expanding. We all knew why they were doing it with the case of Jason Dominguez, specifically with his service time and his rookie eligibility and all that good stuff that we all love to talk about so much and see the organizations continue to try to manipulate, and the fun of all that. But we were all just questioning, amidst all this happening, why Verdugo is still getting looks. And now the playoffs start. We've seen certain moments of Dominguez's bat coming back a bit, but then the Yankees would also sit him some days where it was just inexplainable why they would do that, just really confusing. Had a couple of mistakes out in the field, some pretty blatant ones where he just straight up missed balls, so that just wasn't a good look either. You can't really have that happen in October. And after all that takes place, the Yankees had a decision to make when it came to the playoffs. And we'll hit on this a bit more when we talk about what the Yankees ended up finally going with for the ALDS as far as their roster. That's just about the only Yankees news there is for today. So we'll talk about that in a second. But the Yankees had a decision to make. Verdugo or Dominguez. Not only for the better part of the whole round of the ALDS, but to start especially in Game 1. Would really be a big statement, I think, depending on which one is to start the series out there. The Yankees ultimately went with Verdugo. You would imagine that I would have a humongous problem with this. I did have a problem with it to a degree because I do think that especially with the Yankees' last couple of postseason appearances, the Yankees' main problem was the fact that their hitting, or lack thereof, did them in ultimately. And I think that Jason's offensive potential would do them well. So with the bat, I was not too happy, as you can imagine. With the glove, and this is what had me come back down from my anger a bit upon just really sitting and thinking about it, it is true what people say all the time, that the defense is so important in the postseason. And for that reason, I kind of understood why the Yankees went with Verdugo in left field, because I even said to end the season, I admitted it, that even though I critiqued the hell out of Verdugo, deservedly so with his bat, that when it comes to defense, Verdugo has the edge. He does. He's a better left fielder than Dominguez is. Dominguez is a center fielder by trade. And that's what he was really trained to do for the most part. He was getting left field looks in the minor leagues in preparation to potentially have to play left field with the Yankees in the majors. That is true. But it still wasn't pretty for him out there. And defense does have that much importance in the postseason. So that really balanced me out for the most part, I guess you could say, when it comes to Verdugo having gotten the nod for Game 1. Wasn't happy about it from an offensive standpoint. Of course, that ended up working out wonderfully anyway, which makes it all good because Verdugo was also very good defensively and left as expected. But yeah, with the defense, that put me more at ease. It really did. So while I wasn't happy from an offensive perspective, and again, I even ended up being wrong about that, which I'm more than happy to report today, at least as of Game 1. But with the defense, it helped to put me at ease a bit more. So that's the best I could explain what I was feeling. Now, as far as how hard I was on him in making any sort of apologies after last night, well, it was just one game, I'll say that much. But Verdugo had a press conference that I very much appreciated. And you know that this is how I feel, and I'm consistent with this, because even when I'm hard on someone, Stanton has even been a victim of this as well. Despite me being a Stanton guy, I'm a fan of Stanton's, even though sometimes he pisses the hell out of me, like he does everybody else, especially his haters. But regardless of where you are on the spectrum with someone like Stanton, he's always someone who is going to take accountability for not playing up to their potential, maybe doing something stupid, not being as good as he knows he can be. And I always say after each and every one of those prior Stanton pressers that I appreciate him for being so upfront and honest and holding himself accountable. I appreciate that in any player. And I'm staying consistent with that with Verdugo here because that's what his press conference last night was full of as well. Him holding himself accountable. I even got the clip of it because I loved it so much. I got to give him kudos for this. I'm going to play it for you right now in case you didn't hear it. Whether or not you're a Verdugo guy, this answer is very respectable from his perspective when questioned by the media with how do you feel about the fans having booed you all this time and with how rough of a time you were having and coming through tonight and hearing them really go insane and having the night that you had and whatnot. Take a listen to Verdugo's A-plus answer.
I mean, mentally, man, I feel like I'm pretty real with myself, you know what I mean? As in, fans booing me, fans getting on me, man, I understand it, you know what I mean? Like, I was booing myself too, you know what I'm saying? Like, we ran through a course where I just kind of let it, spiral out of control a little bit, and, for me, it was, just really leaning on my guys in the clubhouse, man. They all got my back. They all know what kind of player I am and, how I played throughout my whole career, and just kept telling me, man, don't let this season or this little glimpse kind of make your whole year. You can make up for a lot of things in the playoffs.
With that answer, Verdugo earned a lot of my respect back. I gotta be honest, I love that. I'm a sucker for guys holding themselves accountable when they fail, because I do the same thing with myself. I'm very hard on myself when I don't do as good as I feel I could, and I appreciate that quality in other people. And I will say this, and it's not just me doing this in hindsight and not owning up to my being hard on Verdugo in the past. You can listen back to prior episodes within the last month. I said this. I never was mad at Verdugo for Verdugo playing. That's a Yankees decision. I was more so mad at the Yankees for making decisions at the time that I felt, and just about everybody else felt, were not good for the team. If you want to say that, you thought that Dominguez was the wrong move blatantly, well, you're probably lying. You're probably lying. Because everybody thought that. Literally everyone. Unless you thought differently and you have receipts to prove it, then go ahead and show me. But just about all of us were rooting for Verdugo to not play anymore. Reasonably so. Because even he just said it was a spiral that got out of control. I let it happen, and that's that. So my frustration, while it definitely was at Verdugo as well, because, he was just a different player at the beginning, and ultimately it ended up evening out his numbers to what he more or less always was in some regards, not all regards when it comes to all statistics. But I was more so mad at the Yankees for making the continual decisions to play him over a kid who should be getting more and more experience, especially in the place that the Yankees are in now, to prep for that. That was more so a gripe with the Yankees. But I was hard on Verdugo himself as well. I was. I'm owning up to that. And he can go right back to being really bad at the plate, particularly for the rest of the playoffs, or he can continue doing this thing where he's coming up in the clutch and just make up for everything in the season, and that would be great. I'm fine with that, and I'd be more than happy to go clean slate and say I'm sorry for the things I said in the regular season when I was judging you. It was valid, and even he did admit that. He did. Because it was a lot of months of some very bad gameplay at the plate. It was really bad. So I think if even he can admit that, I think cut me a little slack here because it was valid. But he is absolutely correct, like I said before, about the playoffs offering a clean slate and being able to make up for the things that you really wish you could erase from the regular season. The playoffs are as good an opportunity to do that as any. He is 100% correct about that. And if he is to do that going forward and helps the Yankees on the path to a potential champion, people are not going to remember the regular season. They're not going to remember it. They're going to remember that he ended up turning into an October legend for the Yankees who helped lead them to a 28th title. That's what they'll remember. And that's what I'll remember. A lot of us fans are the same, not all of us, but a lot of fans in that specific regard are very similar. And understandably so. You play for a championship. So in real time, as the season goes along, if you suck, people are going to probably call you out for it. But ultimately, if when it's truly important on the real road to a title, if you're a big component of said title and a big reason why you were pushed towards it, that's naturally going to be what people primarily remember. And there's nothing wrong with that. Except for the people who went absolutely over the top, of course. I would never make it personal with Verdugo and talk about him with his personal life or just about anything like that. But I've really criticized his gameplay heavily throughout. And hey, even he said it was deserved. But I am more than happy to, if he continues to do this in the playoffs, get ready to put out a formal apology. I'll already apologize for last night if it's really necessary amongst anybody. But I also don't really feel it's too necessary because I kept it within the bounds of baseball validly. And even he said he understood. These guys hold themselves accountable, players like Verdugo, and I appreciate the hell out of that. And when they do that, I wish them nothing but the best. I do acknowledge that, especially because of the fact that he's objectively better in left field defensively than Dominguez. There is value in that, especially in October. In the regular season, I didn't really think there was a reason for that, because especially in that last week when the Yankees were really tying things up, I thought that was a solid opportunity for Dominguez to continue to get more looks and accumulate that experience. But especially in October, that defense is very important, so I understand that, and that's what brought me down from my anger a little bit initially. But from an offensive perspective, I'd still like to see Jason get some looks out there, even if it's got to be later in the game as a substitution or a pinch hitting appearance or even a base running appearance, because Jason was really running the bases well towards the end there, had a lot of stolen bags and was running a lot. I just like to see the kid still get some looks, but I mean, if Verdugo's going to keep doing that offensively, especially given his already well-established left field defense, it's going to be tough to sit him. You play the hot hand, especially in the playoffs. So kudos to Verdugo, especially for that press conference to follow the game. Much respect for that, honestly. Real respect for that. And I hope going forward, all the Yankees can really do, honestly, is just take today's day off, come back out tomorrow, hoping that they scrubbed away all the ugliness that took place last night. Really take it with them that they were just fortunate to get that win and be proud of themselves that they never gave up. Take away that ugliness and just continue pushing forward. Do not underestimate the Royals. They're a potential sleeper, especially with that pitching of theirs. Just correct what you did wrong, get rid of a lot of the crap, and just go out there and put your best foot forward tomorrow and for the rest of the series. That's really all you could hope for. And speaking of going forward, whether it be for the rest of this series or for the rest of the postseason, just one more point that I wanted to hit on before moving forward to Yankees news and any other further playoff discussion that we have today, because I did say I would hit on slightly some of the other stuff going on around Major League Baseball other than the Yankees. The discussion that's been going on throughout the Yankees community about the Yankees having the easiest path to the World Series that they have had since the beginning of the Judge era. Now, I had hit on this mentality last week already, but I want to reiterate some things and actually present some new thoughts. I agree that right now, with the Yankees being the only representation on the American League side outside of the AL Central, which is crazy to think about because the AL Central is widely regarded as the weakest division in the American League and one of the weakest, if not the weakest, throughout all of Major League Baseball for years prior to this one. Now, this year, you had the Guardians winning the division by a healthy margin, but a lot of conflict in second, third, and fourth place. A lot of intense wild card races going on straight through to the end, and now it's three of those teams against the Yankees, pretty much. So I do think that with the Astros having been eliminated, which is crazy, unbelievable, and with the Royals in their path now, and either the Tigers or the Guardians after for the ALCS potentially, I do agree completely that this is the easiest potential path to the World Series the Yankees have had since the beginning of the Judge era. I said that last week, and I'll say it again this week. I do agree with that. I was saying last week that depending on their opponents, it could be because the Orioles and the Astros go out, which they did after the wild card round, unbelievably, especially in the Astros case. But if they do go out, they have potentially the easiest path. That is how it would play out, and that's where we're at now, and I'm going to stay consistent with that. However, not only do I not enjoy particularly, tempting fate, but I still have my mistrusts with this team, many of which we saw in yesterday's game, which is why I think it's plenty valid to point them out, despite still being happy and thrilled about the win. Not to mention that I just, in general, prefer to guard myself as much as humanly possible against potential heartbreak. So there's that too, but there's a lot that goes into it. So there's that, or those, I should say, aspects of it that give me some pause from definitively saying that, but it is objectively the truth. In the past, especially with the Astros being out of it now, compared to the past, this is the easiest path. That's not to say the Royals don't have sneaky good pitching and they could be a potential sleeper. That's not to say that if the Tigers actually end up moving on against Cleveland, that they could end up being an easy matchup, because even if it was some time ago now, I do have some Yankees versus Tigers postseason trauma from earlier on as a Yankee fan personally, having actually been in attendance for Game 5 of the 2011 ALDS at Yankee Stadium against them, and seeing them get swept by them in the 2012 ALCS after Jeter broke his ankle. Again, yes, I understand. Very different times, strenuating circumstances, completely different team on both ends because of how long ago it was. I get it. I just have some PTSD with these two teams matching up against each other in the playoffs most recently. That's all I'm saying. So it's tough, because both things can be true. This could be the easiest path they've had, but these teams are still here in the playoffs for a reason. There's no definitive outlier. That's a big overall thing that we've spoken about for weeks now, which makes it complicated. It does, regardless of whether or not you think it is the easiest path. And again, I think it is, but it does make things interesting and a little bit unpredictable. So I'm cautiously saying that I do agree with that, but I do think people should also, to a degree like I am, be a little bit careful flaunting that idea too much, potentially, because that could really come back to bite. But as far as it being their easiest path and thereby what's happened throughout the rest of the league to make it the easiest path, yeah, as far as the rest of baseball, it's been crazy, guys. Out of the wild card series, I got 3 out of my 4 predictions correct. But first off, even before that, like I mentioned before, the strenuating circumstances for the Mets with them and the Braves having to play last Monday and the craziness of that. That Mets and Braves game where the Mets won 8-7 was one of the crazier games I have ever seen. And the following Mets games after that in the playoffs so far, some of them have slightly rivaled that. Even especially today's game. Crazy. The Mets have been unbelievable. They have some sort of dark magic going on that only the man upstairs could have the kind of power to manifest, because this is ridiculous. I mean, even in the Braves game, just looking defeated up until the 8th inning, down 3-0, scoring 6 runs, with the Braves answering back for 4, taking the lead back, and then the Mets taking the lead again in the top of the 9th to win 8-7 and secure a playoff spot. And then the Braves winning in Game 2, which eliminated the Diamondbacks, because for the Diamondbacks to make it, one of these teams had to sweep the doubleheader. Very complex stuff there with the wild card arrangement there towards the end, but crazy doubleheader there. Wild card round started. I had the Mets defeating the Brewers in 3. I nailed that, with Game 3 being what it was for them, which was unbelievable. This is the only series that did end up going all 3 games to the wild card round. Again, another instance of the Mets looking dead towards the end of the game. Then, unbelievably, with 2 outs to go, Devin Williams, one of the better relievers in Major League Baseball, with the Brewers. He has even pitched in the World Baseball Classic before. He has a devastating changeup, throws a wonderful fastball as well, got a good heater. A very respected reliever. The Mets bombed him in the 9th inning down to their last couple of outs. Pete Alonso, after having made an error in foul territory prior, and people thinking, especially with the Mets down 2-0 and lifeless to that point, that might have been his last moment as a Met. Nope. Comes up, 3-run homer in the top of the 9th to give them a 3-2 lead. Mets win 4-2 and move on to face the Phillies in the DS. Another unbelievable comeback there. But I had the Mets winning in 3 there. Not quite that dramatically, but I still nailed that. I had the Royals beating the Orioles. Just got the game count on that wrong. I had the Royals winning in 3. They ended up winning in 2, so I got the team right. So I did get that much right for that. I had the Padres smoking the Braves. It really just wasn't that much of a contest. It was only a run game in that last game, but especially you could just see with the way the two teams were playing, the Braves weren't going to be a match for them. They ended up getting swept. I had them getting swept, so I nailed that one all around again. So 2 series that I nailed, the team and the amount of games. Another series that I nailed the team, but not the amount of games. And then the Tigers and the Astros, that was the only series that I got completely incorrect. There was one little aspect that I got right. I thought the Tigers would win Game 1, mainly thanks to Skubal. But I did have the Astros coming back and winning the next 2 and winning in 3 and moving on to face Cleveland in the other DS round. The Tigers instead won both games in Houston, the first 2 right away, and just got the Astros the hell out of there. Unbelievable. The Tigers continue to leave me speechless. So the wild card rounds, very interesting. Again, the Orioles only scoring 1 run in both games combined, just not showing up at all. Over-reliance on the home run ball. Pitching just not coming through in those big moments. It was really the offense's fault mainly. It's just awful. Mets and Brewers, very exciting. Tigers and Astros, unexpected but thrilling. Screw the Astros. Goodbye. And the Padres and Braves, expected. Now, the DS's, my predictions have been as follows. I've had the Yankees beating the Royals in 5. Yes, I do have it taking 5. And Game 1 is an encouraging start to it, but I still have it going 5 because I'm not going to just completely write off the Royals. I do like their pitching, obviously. So much so that I'm having them push the series 5 games in my mind. Tigers and Guardians, I had the Guardians winning this in 4, and the Guardians did win the first game, so that's a good start to it as well for me. Mets and Phillies, this one is crazy so far. Mets in the first game yesterday again. They had 1 hit going into the 8th inning because Zach Wheeler threw an absolute freaking gem against the Mets, his former team, who he has done very well against for the most part, very well. And then in the 8th inning, the Phillies bullpen takes over. The Mets get off the canvas once again, score 5 freaking runs, add on another one in the top of the 9th to make it 6-1, because the Phillies only got 1 run to that point with a leadoff home run in the first inning by Schwarber, and they would end up losing 6-2. Another late game Mets comeback. So, and that even happened almost again today, except the Phillies got the last punch today. I had this series going 5 with the Phillies ultimately winning it. I could very well be wrong about this because of how the Mets are playing. It's been unbelievable, but I do have the Phillies winning this in 5. All I know is that Queens is going to be insane when they get back there to play on Tuesday. It's going to be a madhouse in Queens. But even today's game, just unbelievable with the Mets. That's why I started so late again today with my recording. I couldn't tear myself away from it. But for once, you've seen this theme play out a lot, and it was funny, AJ Pierzynski said this on commentary today, that for the Phillies, it might have actually been good for them, for the Mets to take the lead first, because in all the games, whether it be the Braves game or the Brewers game or even in Game 1 of this series in Philly, the Mets will look dead in a game. It looks like they're just going to go down without even a heartbeat, a pulse with their offense. And the other team has the lead throughout most of the game, and they come back and steal it away from them, steal victory from the jaws of defeat. But today, even AJ Pierzynski said this on commentary, like, the Mets took the lead today. So maybe this will change the dynamic a little bit and they won't really hold the lead, and maybe the Phillies will flip the script because the Mets might not know what to do with the lead, grabbing the lead first, actually. And that's actually how it played out ultimately, with the Phillies getting the last laugh and walking it off in the bottom of the 9th. But even today's game was incredible. It was 3-0 Mets into the bottom of the 6th. Bryce Harper hits a 2-run shot. Nick Castellanos hits a game-tying solo shot, making it 3-3. Nick Castellanos has this funny sort of air about him that people always hit on, that he usually gets these humongous hits and huge home runs and has these big days on days of tragedies or when huge people die. Like, it's just funny. So, like, right when he hit this home run today, this game-tying shot, and of course, he would go on to have a huge double later on as well, and then, obviously, the walk-off. But after he hit this home run in particular, I was looking up on the internet, like, who was major that died on October 6th in any year in the past? So funny, but, I mean, not the person dying, but you get what I mean, the whole mantra around Nick Castellanos. But anyway, he tied the game. Awesome stuff. And the Mets added on another run in the 7th to make it 4-3 because Nimmo answered back with a solo shot right after that. It's amazing. Anytime the Mets took a punch to the face, they would answer right back. They would get right off the canvas and punch the opponent right back in the jaw and knock them the hell down. I gave this analogy long before anybody on the TV networks did today. I gave this analogy, I would say, yesterday. And then I actually, for the first time, posted it on Twitter today. But I said it to my brother, my girlfriend, and my friend who came over to watch the playoffs with us last night. But I actually tweeted it on Twitter for the first time today at, I think it was maybe like, I don't know, give or take 6:15, 6 o'clock, 6:15, saying this analogy that a lot of other people would come up with towards the end of the game or even after the game was over. Even the media kept on saying it. But I was saying, like, the Mets, and it's ironic because they were facing Philadelphia of all teams, and this is where this character is from, obviously, an all-time favorite of mine, considering the first of these movies is my favorite movie ever. I've said that many times, so you know I'm not lying to you. But I kept on saying, like, it's unbelievable how many times the Mets continue to come back. They have a better chin than Rocky freaking Balboa, for crying out loud, who was the king of underdog comebacks and people never expecting it from him and constantly getting knocked down and getting back up and knocking the other guy back down. The king of it. And I was saying the Mets really have that mentality in this run. And it started all the way back in the Braves doubleheader in that first game. And it has not stopped. It's been a run like I have not seen before. Magic that could really have you feeling like this team could really, like, this could be their freaking year. It's insane. I even tweeted earlier today, like, oh my God, the Phillies took the lead again, like in the bottom of the 8th, because then the Mets made it 4-3, obviously, and the Phillies scored 3 more in the bottom of the 8th, unbelievably, to make it 6-4 over the Mets going into the top of the 9th. I mean, it was crazy. Stott got that 2-run triple. Then he was driven in after that after Vientos bobbled the ball. So it was 6-4 Phillies. And I said, oh my God, Philly jumped out ahead again. And then I said, but probably the Mets will probably come back again, though. And they did! They did! Vientos hit another freaking home run. His second home run of the night. So now it's 6-6. I was like, I was joking! It's unbelievable watching these games. I just couldn't tear myself away from it. Again, that's why I started so freaking late tonight. Oh my gosh. And then in the bottom of the 9th, Castellanos comes up again and walks off the friggin' game. So now the series is even at 1 coming back to Queens. Unbelievable. I stay consistent with my predictions. No matter what happens throughout the series, I stay consistent with it throughout. I have the Phillies winning in 5, and whether or not they lost today, as ridiculous as it might sound, in the event they were going back to Citi Field potentially down 2-0, but especially after today, I'm sticking with my original prediction from before the series even started. Phillies in 5, but it has been unbelievable so far. And the Mets' dark magic that they have going, it can't be explained. Some things cannot be explained in life, and this is one of them. This run that the Mets are on. And they have nothing to be ashamed of for losing today's game. They did it right, and they came back a bunch more times once again, and they were as resilient as hell, with no quit in their game. It's just ultimately the Phillies got the last punch. It happens. So we'll see what happens when they go back to Queens, but that was my prediction for them. Padres and Dodgers. My original prediction, I'm sticking to this, and this helps with the Padres winning so far in the 6th inning. They're winning 4-1, so that's awesome. I had the Padres, believe it or not. Some people may see this as disrespect to the Dodgers, and this did complicate things with the Dodgers' victory last night, although the Padres had a good start to the game, encouragingly so. But I had the Padres winning in 4. Not even going the full 5. I don't know. I'm just in like a screw the Dodgers mentality right now. I don't know. And the Padres very well could have held that game last night. It just didn't go their way. They started off well 3-0 with a Machado home run. Then Ohtani answered right back with a 3-run shot and tied the game at 3, and I had to listen to all the glazing over that. And it just ended up going badly. They lost 7-5, the Padres. But I think the Padres have what it takes to beat the Dodgers. I do. Even after losing Joe Musgrove until 2026 due to Tommy John, which is devastating. But I still think the Padres have it in them. I think they could still get it done in 4. Call me crazy. I don't know. They come back home to San Diego and just get the job done. Win both of those games. Screw it. So Padres and Dodgers, I have the Padres winning in 4. Even if I don't get the game count right, my most important thing is getting the team right. I hit 3 out of 4 with that, as I said, in the wild card round. Let's see how I do in the DS. Ultimately, by the next time we talk next Sunday, we will know for sure. both with the Yankees and everybody else, which is insane to think about. The latest that anything could go is next Saturday with the ALDSs. If they're both to go 5, if either or both are to go 5, the last game will be on Saturday. And then the NLCSs will begin on Sunday. So a lot of exciting stuff to come here. But those were my predictions to start each of these DSs. Those were my predictions with the Wild Card Series prior, just to keep you consistent on what those are. We'll see how it turns out. Very interesting stuff going on here. But the playoffs so far are living up to the hype. Padres still winning right now. And this is the last game of the night because only the National League side played things today. The American League side will get back to business tomorrow. Only the American League side, actually. Tigers and Guardians are playing at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Again, Yankees Royals tomorrow at 7:38. I'm so nervous. I can't with the playoffs, man. Even if I do think it is their easiest path, I'm still nervous as hell. Naturally so. That's what we're supposed to do as fans. But as far as Yankees news before we move on to the social media segment and wrap up for today, guys, the only thing really to talk about definitively, other than Jake Cousins actually being back in time to rejoin the bullpen just in time for the DS like we hit on before, which I'm thrilled about because the Yankees were talking about the possibility of that happening and it turned out to be a reality. It's very important for that bullpen. Although we didn't see him yesterday, we could very well see him going forward. Just glad to have him back, and I'm glad that it did end up going well and he ended up being able to return for the DS. Other than that, just general news on who ended up making the final 26-man roster for the American League Division Series. For position players, it was the two catchers, of course, Trevino and Wells, followed by John Birdie, Gleyber Torres, Anthony Volpe, Duke Ellis, who actually ended up making the roster over Marcus Stroman. That was a discussion that a lot of people were having with Marcus Stroman, wondering whether or not he would make the roster as a pitcher, whether it be in the rotation or the bullpen. He did not end up making it, controversially so for some people. But Gleyber, Volpe, Dominguez, Duke Ellis, Trent Grisham, understandably so, another example of defense being important in the playoffs. Well, there you go with Trent. Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton, Alex Verdugo, Oswaldo Cabrera, Jazz Chisholm, and Ben Rice. Pitchers, Cole, Heel, Cousins, Hamilton, Tim Hill, Clay Holmes, Tommy Kahnle, Tim Meza, Rodon, Schmidt, Weaver. Those are your 26. And the only surprise, really, is that Stroman was left off of it. That's really the only surprise. I'm glad that Mark Leiter Jr. is not on it. I completely understand why the Yankees would do that. Ian Hamilton, obviously another huge aspect of the back end of that bullpen as well. Didn't see him yesterday either, but definitely to be joined with that group of names I mentioned earlier on in the show when I was talking about the big back end bullpen arms. But nonetheless, I don't really have any problems with this roster, except I'm just surprised about Stroman and Duke Ellis being added to it over him. That's really the only thing. I mean, I'm not like pissed about it because, I mean, Stroman in the second half, especially in September, has been very bad. But just over Duke Ellis, I'm kind of surprised. But the Yankees also probably feel like Duke Ellis is a great speed option to have potentially in a game as well. Defensive value to potentially go along with that. So I guess I sort of understand. But I think the Yankees have good enough pitching depth, especially because they didn't have to overuse too much of it yesterday. I mean, the bullpen was plenty efficient and effective, and plus they had today off, so that kind of resets things once again here. So I think it's all good as far as pitching, especially with leaving Mark Leiter Jr. off. But that's the 26 man with Jake Cousins having returned. Those are the big two main pieces of news. Otherwise, I think that just about covers everything as far as the overall discussion regarding everything surrounding postseason Yankees right now, guys. The only thing that's really left to do is a social media segment. I'll just read a few replies because we're getting a little bit later than I anticipated on getting here, but anyway, open-ended question for today once again. Pretty straightforward and obvious since it's really the only thing that people care to discuss. And really the only question that matters, one could say. Who, in your opinion, will ultimately win the ALDS between the Yanks and Royals, and in how many games? Well, I already gave my prediction for it before. I do think the Royals are good enough to push this thing to 5 games, but regardless of the game count, again, getting the team right is what's really important to me. I think the Yankees are going to be victorious in this one. Even though I'm not completely writing the Royals off, definitely. I don't completely write off any playoff opponent. Again, they're there for a reason. You don't want to tempt fate or any of that crap. So, nonetheless, I do think it'll be the Yanks, and I do think it'll go 5, possibly go 4. I think the Yankees could possibly do that, especially if they win Game 2 tomorrow night. But, I mean, if they do that, then they could actually just sweep. But Nonetheless, I do think one of these great Royals pitchers will end up taking down the Yankees, unfortunately. Could be wrong. Hope I'm wrong. But I think it'll be pushed to 5. That's just my personal opinion. Let's see what a few of you have to say. First up is at SteveZim16 saying Yanks in 4. They'll take one of the next 2, paving the way for Cole to return in Game 4 and be all extraordinarily angry about his Game 1 performance and absolutely destroy the Royals. Honestly, Steve, I love this for Cole. I do think that would be what plays out. I do think the next start will be a bounce back for him, to be honest. It's just a shame because he was talking about all the energy in Yankee Stadium and how that really just changes things from a playoff perspective for any sort of a pitcher, especially him. It just pushes you forward and elevates you, and then he just did what he did last night. Kind of stinks, but I do think he'll bounce back next time out. So I agree with that. Love that for him. Hope that plays out if a Game 4 is necessary. Even if it's to take place in a Game 5, hope he just goes out there and bounces back and kicks ass. Rebecca at Peace Now for Life. My good friend Rebecca says, I say it'll be Yankees in 4 games. Can't wait for tomorrow night's game. Well, another Yanks in 4 prediction. I can't wait either, although I'm just terribly anxious about it as well. So that's just a personal anxiety problem. You don't have to worry about that. But 2 4-game predictions. All right. At Cashman Sucks NYY says, I think it might go 5 games with hopefully the Yankees winning. Well, there you go. That agrees with me. I got Yanks in 5. So fair enough there. Spencer at Musician DMD, my good friend Spencer. Hope you're doing well, my friend, as always. Spencer says, if yesterday's win was a piece of artwork, it was no Picasso. Nevertheless, the Yanks showed grit and gutted out a win. As unlikely as it may seem, as against the odds as it may look, I will assert that the Yankees will sweep. I would love that, personally. And that's a good analogy, I guess, too, although Picasso's paintings were not really surrounded by neatness, I think it's safest to say, and probably the nicest way to say it. So maybe it was a bit of a Picasso. But nonetheless, I get the analogy. Like I said, it wasn't the prettiest of wins, to say the least. And it's okay to say that. Once again, I want to stress that. It's okay to admit that and still be happy about the win. Both can be true. But, yeah, I would love a sweep. I think that goes without saying. Laura at Laura_Icemont. My buddy Laura's next saying Yankees in 4 games. I want our team to go to the World Series this year. Another 4-game prediction. I would also not be against that either. I'm down for a quicker 4-game series as long as it doesn't go the full 5 as much as I'm predicting it to do so. Wanting them to go to the World Series, yeah, well, that's the pinnacle of it. That's the goal. That's what you play to achieve. And I do think, slightly hesitatingly so, because you don't want to say this too strongly. Again, I will reiterate, this is definitely objectively the easiest path they have to the World Series. Because if they are to move on, especially against Cleveland, who they usually very well take care of business with, in the playoffs especially, I think it's safe to say I would definitely be calling for them to go to the World Series, despite my mistrust in the team with certain things that they tend to do at times, as I've well established. But it might be a little bit weird for people because I was saying that I don't think that they're going to make it there. I did say that last week, so I want to address that for a second. I do understand that I said that, but that was also with the thought process that the Astros would make it past the wild card round, because, again, I did have them winning that series and potentially even taking down Cleveland and waiting for the Yankees once again in the CS and play out exactly like it did in 17, 19, and 2022. So now that the Astros were out, again, things change as time goes along, and you pivot. Now, I do think the path is objectively easier, although I do think it is not a foregone conclusion, because nothing is, especially when postseason baseball is concerned. So I just wanted to make that clear, and clear up any confusion with people potentially calling me out saying, oh, you had the Yankees falling short of the World Series. I still kind of, like that little part of me that's hesitant to fully say that this is the easiest path, still believes that a bit. But, of course, now that the Astros are out, obviously I acknowledge that the path is easier, of course. I would think that's just common sense, but I just had to explain that for people out there who firsthand experience that common sense might not be so common. In any event, I do realize that we're around the hour and 40-minute mark, so let's just skip to the final usual 2, as always, my objectively biggest supporters, my amazing girlfriend and my amazing mother. First up, as usual, is my girlfriend at Vic Salimo, and she says, it's hard to predict these things, but I'll say the Yankees win, and they'll do it in 5 games. All right, so the general consensus seems to be Yankees in 4 or Yankees in 5. Primarily Yankees in 4, I think. There are a few more replies that I have seen that also say Yankees in 4. I have 1 Yankees sweep. That's awesome. I would definitely love that, but I do not think that they will sweep as much as I would love that. And I could very well be wrong. Hopefully they will sweep. That'd be awesome. But yeah, the general consensus, Yankees in 4, Yankees in 5 for the most part. Let's finish off with my mom, Julia Gina Scudero, and she says, "Hi, Mike. Hey, Mom. On my way home from the airport answering your social media question, followed the Yankees and Royals game from Punta Cana and made me sweat." Yes, my mom did just arrive back home tonight from a trip that was a few days long to the Dominican Republic. Glad she's back home okay. And they did have a great time, but she also, that's very real of you, Mom. That's what real fans do. Even in another country, you are watching Yankees baseball. That is how it's done. Thank God they pulled it off. What the hell is up with Volpe? I predict the Yankees will win in 5, hoping they leave the sloppy gameplay behind. Yeah, me too. That is what we saw at times throughout 24 that had me a bit unsettled going into the playoffs, despite also being simultaneously confident, which is totally fine. It happens. Like I said, life is gray, not black and white. But regardless, yeah, what the hell is up with Volpe? He's got to get his crap together. He's got to get it together. That's all. He's got to be better. Those things cannot happen, especially in the playoffs. We know this. But another Yankees in 5 to finish off. So I think it's safe to say that throughout the vast majority, and I've seen this all throughout the Yankee community too, just talking even outside of my social media segment, it seems like the general consensus is Yankees in 4 or 5. And I think that's plenty reasonable. And there is, some people might have some bias with the Yankees having taken game 1. But this is personally, I can only speak for myself. Maybe you did have those predictions before the series started like I did, but this Yankees in 5 prediction that I had, it was genuinely before the series even started. I make my predictions before the series starts, and I stay consistent throughout the series regardless of the outcome of each game. That's what you got to do when you predict, you know? So, wildcard series, I was right with 3 out of 4 with the teams. Some of them I completely nailed both aspects, team and game count in the series, but we'll see how it turns out with the DS, because again, before I head out today, I just want to remind, by the next time we talk next Sunday, with the Yankees series, as well as every other division series, whether it be the National League or the American League, by the time we yap again next Sunday for episode 239 of Yapping Yankees, we will know the outcome for every single division series, and the NLCS will be basically just getting underway. It's crazy how fast time goes, guys. The wild card series is done. We're already, for a couple of series, the National League particular, already a couple of games into the division series, and by next Sunday, we'll already be prepping for the championship series, which is obviously the round before the World Series. And it'll all be over before we know it, of course, because of how fast time goes, but let's just stay in the moment and enjoy, while also flipping out, naturally, of course, with postseason baseball. That is simply the way of things. Otherwise, guys, that is all for episode 238 of Yapping Yankees today. Still got over an hour and 40 minutes juiced out, even with just one game having been played this past week. I mean it when I say I got the best yap in all the land, baby. I mean it. You can't say I don't. I will milk well over an hour and a half of content even out of just one game, because there's still plenty for me to talk about and hit on. So, never underestimate the Mike Scudero yap. What can I tell you? But otherwise, thank you so much for staying all throughout the show, all the way up to this point. If you did, you're a real one if you did. I know a lot of you do. I give you all the credit in the world for listening to my crazy, insufferable ass yap for over an hour and a half. Sometimes even climbing towards 2 hours. And also, I, of course, give an extra thank you to all of those who interacted on the social media segment for this week. Whether or not I get to you each week, or some weeks I might, some weeks I don't. Obviously, it depends. But whether or not I get to you on a given week, I especially appreciate you for taking a second to even, especially interact with the show and give your thoughts on things. It means the world to me. It really does. So thank you all for yet another phenomenal episode. A ton of fun for me as always recording, and I hope you had just as much fun listening to it as I did recording it. But episode 238, that is a wrap for today. Remember to follow me on all social medias, my friends. Facebook fan page, Mike Scudero NY. Twitter, or X, is at Mike Scudero, and my Instagram is Mike Scuds97. Subscribe to Yapping Yankees on all 4 of the platforms it is available on as well. It is YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Like, subscribe, comment, share it wherever you may be listening to spread the word and spread the love. And if you have time, listen to the past Yapping Yankees episodes that you might have missed as well if you have a moment. Episode 1 all the way up to episode 238 today are all available on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And on YouTube, you can find episodes 34 all the way up to episode 238 today. But once again, I thank you 3,000 for listening to me yap today, my good friends. As always, I have been your host, Mike Scudero, and we shall yap again next Sunday, October the 13th, when I come at you with episode 239 in the second 2024 postseason edition of Yapping Yankees. But until then, guys, hang in there. Be patient. Please stay safe. Look out for your loved ones. Go ahead and kick life's ass this week, my friends, despite the elevated extreme anxiety over Yankees playoff baseball as usual. And Yankees, as always, especially now, I mean, just what I said before. Clean up the nonsense from Game 1. Please win the series so next Sunday is not a miserable season-ending episode, but instead a happy and joyful episode 239 in which we can sit here and prep for the ALCS starring our 2024 Yankees. Obviously hosting the series too, since they would have home field advantage as they have guaranteed all the way through to the World Series after locking up the 1 seed in the American League, which eases the anxiety a little bit, but not totally because that is impossible to do these days. But until said ALCS hopefully takes place next Sunday when we yap again, as always, take care and let's go Yanks. 10 more wins to go, guys. Let's get it, boys.